Welcome back, and I'm sitting here still with Jeff and Dave. We're still looking at the subtle power of spiritual abuse. Now in this talk we will focus on the part 2 of the book, which focuses on abusive leaders and why they are trapped. Abusive leaders, why are they trapped?
If it is about how things look is what matters, they have to perpetually be more than they really are. Yeah. They have to pretend that they're more right than they really are. I think part of the trap for them is that in order to maintain control over someone else, I've got to continually work on whatever it is that my image is that gives me this sense of power over you, perfection, the idea that I actually am hearing from God. You got to be pretending you're hearing from God. And you have to maintain that, perpetually keep it up, and I don't think you can. What happens often is you can keep this thing kind of going in terms of the image, in terms of some people, but often what happens is you end up with another life. You end up with a double life, and you're acting out in ways that are totally inconsistent with what you say you are and what you say you believe. It reminds me a little bit of the Wizard of Oz when he's, and the curtain gets pulled back and he starts yelling, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain!" When that kind of thing gets exposed, because it's all smoke and mirrors. And their authority is not real authority. Like Jeff said, when Jesus spoke, people noticed he had authority. He didn't walk around going, "I am the authority." The scribes and Pharisees did that. It's another one of the telltale signs. I can feel it as a person who's in, a senior pastor role, that if I was constantly, if I set myself up as someone who was always right, I mean, I think I say what I think, but I don't think I'm always right. But if I had to do that, that would be exhausting for one thing. I mean, it was just incredible. And I would have to I could feel myself needing to get really big at times to keep the control and to prove that I'm right. And I don't know, it just feels exhausting to me. One of the things that I've reflected on a lot, I was 27 years old when I came to Open Door, and you got to dial into that. 27, who in the world am I to talk to people how to do their lives, even to preach? And the text that helped me was Paul, where he said, "My greatest passion is to know him and the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of sufferings, to know Christ intimately." But then he says, not that I've arrived, nor have I obtained it. I do press on. And so as a 27-year-old, I said, I can do that. I cannot stand here as though I know, because I don't. And I have not arrived. I have not obtained it. I'm not even living the life I want to live yet. But I will press on, and I can grow right in front of everybody. To me, I don't know how healthy I am all the time, but that's something that people can trust. It's like I'm not going to ram it down your throat as if I know. I don't know, but I am pressing on, and I am seeking truth and life and God and. But wow, to claim having, part of why I think I've rejected this is because my dad was a pastor, and the pressure that was on him at times to be something that he even knew he wasn't, I think it can wear people out. Now, picture somebody who actually embraces that. I am going to be this mirage of power and authority, and wow, I think there's, it'd be interesting therapeutically if there's actually mental illness at all involved in that. I don't know.
The thing about the Wizard of Oz, when you unpack that for somebody who's been spiritually abused or any abuse. Okay. Who's the problem? Who's the villain in the story? See, people say the witch, you know, but the witch was easy. You just put a drop of water on her, she melts. The wizard controlled the whole deal with a facade. Okay, but then Toto goes over and pulls the curtain back, and then he says, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." All right. So now Toto's the problem. See, what I say to people is basically the moral of the story, there is no wizard. Okay, there is no wizard. Well, there is one. That's Jesus. But other than that, there's no wizard. There's just a man behind the curtain. You know, and they get so much relief from that. You know, they get so, like, it makes so much sense once you have the language to describe it, because they have been told, don't pull back the curtain, don't pull back the curtain. And also, living like some guy's a wizard, and he's not a wizard, he's just a guy, you know. So I was talking about an abusive situation where this is normal, and you get shoved, and that's okay as long as you don't hit me, and then they get hit, and that's okay as long as you don't hit the kids, and, you know, keep moving normal, never comparing it to the real normal, just comparing it to the little adjustments you've made. All right. See, the pastor gets in that trap too, because what he has to do is he has to invest more to rescue everything he's invested, to prove that was a good investment. So he keeps investing more. And then that's why you see pastors blow up, and all of a sudden it's all over the news, and he's been doing this forever, and all that kind of stuff like what's happening now. It's because he created a system in which he himself couldn't ask for help for things all the way along, all along the way. And then finally he can't bear the weight of it anymore, and he blows up. You know, when I was a kid, I had my tonsils out when I was about 8, and my dad went to the gift shop, and he bought me a gift. And what it was, this is like pre-Etch-a-Sketch days. It was a cardboard sheet, kind of stiff cardboard sheet, and then it had a plastic sheet over the top of it. Okay. And it's not the one where you write on the plastic sheet and then you peel it up and then you start over. It's not that one either. It was, underneath the sheet was like a round circle. Okay. And then there were metal chips. And then there was a string and a magnet. And so then you went underneath it and you drew mustaches and eyebrows and all that. And then when you're done, you shake it up and start over. Okay? He's the magnet. And what he's been doing all this time is collecting metal chips. And then finally he can't pull them anymore, and like that. And then it's in the newspapers when he wasn't able to get rid of metal chips all along the way because good pastors don't have metal chips. So he created a system that killed himself, that killed him. Couldn't live up to his own system. Eventually. He never was. But instead of saying I'm not, he acted like he was and pretended he was, and then finally you find out he never was.
We used to talk about this all the time in the early days, and it was about our own, like, how are we going to avoid not just abusing, but our burnout? Because if you are in a system where how things look is what matters, or you've created a system where how things look is what matters, and you yourself have been polishing the outside of the cup and of the bowl, but not dealing with what's really going on inside. All along the way, you've not been part of creating an environment where the little things along the way could be easily said, I'm sorry.
When they came up.
Yeah, when they came up, you go, I'm sorry, I said, I blew it, you can't do that, because that would just, you wouldn't look good, that doesn't look shiny and clean on the outside. And the more that grows, I can just feel it.
I call that not staying current. They don't stay current. And then all of a sudden at the end, and they're instantaneously current. And you find out everything that's been going on the whole time.
Then they're forced to be real. Because
can't help it. Now,
keep
all
up
blew
the
up.
mirage any longer.
Yeah.
And obviously it takes very brave people to tell their stories. To make those people, that has not happened in my case. But
the only way that people would get brave enough to tell the story is if they figured out that it's not Jesus plus anything, it's just Jesus, and they're okay and they can tell the story.
Yeah.
If Jesus is who makes you okay, if he's the final seal of approval, and it is finished, you can't add to it, you can't subtract from it, it's because he did it, you're not doing it. If you believe that, what can you not talk about?
Right. And that, we said that in the earlier video, is the good news.
Yeah.
And what I found here too, which it's incredible how it's not new, what I have been through, because you've already described it in here. We may not know what the kingdom of God practically looks like, but you have a very clear idea of what it not looks like,
right?
What it doesn't look like. Okay, you're saved by grace, but to keep up that grace, to stay on God's good side, now you have to.
Right, and that we used to call that your salvation is a loan, not a gift.
Oh, okay.
It's a loan, and he can call it any time.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not a gift. So it's not really yours. You don't really have it.
Yeah.
You can pull it back, and that's all that is Jesus plus.
Okay. Tell me, from a psychological perspective, what must be going on up here or in the heart of a person to create a world where that's the power they have, and they only have it because they have people that believe them to have that power, but they're okay with that?
I don't think there's a very short answer to that, but I will say a high need for validation.
Okay.
On the part of the leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you're validated by Jesus, then you don't have to get that from other stuff.
Right.
You could even then be a servant, and see that Jesus said whoever would be a leader would be the servant. So he redefines what leaders do.
Right.
Yeah. They're not the boss. They're the biggest servant is the leader.
Yeah.
So the biggest servant, and this is why Jesus had authority. They notice it comes underneath people and lifts them up. Spiritual abusive leaders put themselves over people and press them into whatever their particular mode is for spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can work either way. The way I was raised, it was more that as a Christian, you're humble, you don't cause trouble, you don't reach for the stars, those kinds of things. But in my group, this cult, it was, yes, you will reach for the stars, and not only that, you're not the tail, you're the head, so you reach for the highest possible office.
Well, see, okay, so even if you do it, it's the way you get to these things.
Yeah.
It's not just these things. Okay, so humble, for instance, the epitome of humility, the best story of humility is when Jesus washed the disciples' feet. I mean, everybody says, look at him, be like him, like that. But what it says right before him washing the feet, it says Jesus, knowing that he had come from the Father and was going back to the Father, and knowing that all things had been given into his hands, did the lowest thing. Because he knew who he was, you can do the lowest thing. Humble is not on the checklist of things you need to be so that you're spiritual.
Yeah.
Humble results from knowing some things. And if you know who you are and what is yours and where you're from and where you're going, you can wash windows.
Yeah,
it
really is about that.
Yeah, you have this one little story where you were at someone's home who was a doctor, and he was telling you that his greatest concern with the church was that they're not addressing him with his doctor title.
They call him doctor, remember that?
Yeah.
I do remember that.
They call him Gary or something?
Yeah. And that wasn't even his name. That's what bugged him. Because they called him Gary and his name was John. So, anyway.
Wait, did he work in geriatrics?
No.
How it came about?
No, if I remember right, it was an eye doctor, and it doesn't matter. But you're right. I mean, he was very much into the title. And there was another thing in Matthew 23. Yeah. Don't let anyone call you Father.
Yeah.
I mean, was that was not like Jesus wasn't saying...
He wasn't making a rule against calling people things.
No, he wasn't, and it wasn't like, oh, this is about the Catholic Church. They call it... No. No, it was... But it was... I remember it being a really significant thing for me, where I was as a pastor. A father, in that, the way he meant that was, don't let anybody treat you, and don't you present yourself as if you are the source, Father. God's the Father. So one of the ways you can spot a real shepherd, a true shepherd, is that they're not drawing you. I'll see it. You know, you can see it even on our own staff. Over the years, you see people who draw people to themselves. They just pull them into me. Yeah. And they're filling themselves up with how many people we get to meet. And one of the ways you spot a shepherd is they're always going, it's over there. Yeah, it's over there. That couple who wanted to submit to me, nah, it's over there.
Yes.
But I think the key is the less you as a leader are aware of who you are because of who God says you are, the more you're going to need it from other people. And if you're in a position, like you have a personality or you're charismatic in some way,
like
draw people
even
to yourself,
naturally.
Then you can play that card until people really notice and leave or blow the whistle or whatever. I feel a lot of sympathy for not when it gets that big. I get so irritated when I see it, but when we were talking earlier about the little things that happen along the way, but you've been part of a system where how things look is what matters. I think a lot of pastors maybe, and this isn't in the cultic thing, this is just a day-to-day church life where how things look is what matters. And when they themselves have an issue that needs to be dealt with, they have no one to talk to. And let's even take away that they built the system. They came into a system that was kind of that way. It was that way at Open Door when we first got there.
Yeah.
And you have a struggle with something. To finish the phrase you used before that we talked about, if how things look is what matters, how things are will not get dealt with. And if how things are can't get dealt with, what that means is if you're struggling with anger or lust or you have questions about God, it's more important than you look like you don't struggle with lust, then you don't, it's more important that you look like you have a good marriage than you have a good marriage. Because if what really matters is having a good marriage, you might say, our marriage sucks. You might say out loud, but if you were in a lot of Sunday school classes where how things look is what matters, you would be like, you're ratting on your husband or your wife, or you're the bad person for saying but if you really care about a good marriage, you'd get some help. You'd have to say out loud someplace, there's something wrong. Yeah. And if that's not understood, there's nobody who's going to do it. And this all started with leaders who get to that place too. Yeah. Leaders are human beings, and if they don't have the courage actually to go, I'm not playing by those rules. Yeah. I'm not playing by those rules where how things look is what matters. And they are able to talk about their own struggles and somewhere. Yeah. I see them as incredibly lonely, actually. Yeah. I don't feel a lot of sympathy when they become abusive. I do feel sympathy for the aloneness that they can feel.
When I was a kid, my parents used to watch the Ed Sullivan Show. Do you know? You remember that? Yeah. And he used to have a plate spinner on it, and he would go back and forth, keeping all these plates, from falling, spinning on sticks. Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking. That's what it's like. You have to keep all the plates spinning. Yeah. And then as time goes on, because you have different people that want different things from you, you start having to have different colored plates. So you spin this blue one here to Dave, and another one to you, and another one here all over. And then what happens is one day people start noticing that there's different plates for different people, and then the whole thing falls down. Yeah. The other thing that happened is back to the Wizard of Oz. Yeah. It was always on a Sunday night. It was always shown on a Sunday night.
I know. Yeah. I know what he was going to say. Go ahead.
Well, and I never saw the end of it.
Right.
Ever.
Because
we had to go to church on Sunday night.
Oh.
So I remember the first time I ever saw the whole thing, when it got to where she got to Oz, it's color. Oh. I'd never seen it turn color. I thought, somewhere in the middle of all of this, they invented color.
That's what
You thought that too?
Too.
They invented color.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. No, it was always color.
It
was always color. But I never saw it past the midpoint, because we had to go to church, and that would have been evil to see the Wizard of Oz.
So I'm really drawn to the psyche of a spiritual abuser, because I have spent the last almost 9 years trying to figure out if the leader of our gang knew what he was doing or if that just sort of happened and it was a byproduct.
Doesn't matter.
No.
But it doesn't matter. You know, by and large, you might disagree, but I think you're going to agree. By and large, they have good intentions. They just don't know what they're doing. Yeah. They have good intentions. They believe they want you to grow closer to God. They do. But the way they do that is they put God's approval like a carrot on a stick based on your performance. But they really want you to have God's approval, really. Yeah. It's just that they're getting there in a way that's destructive and tiring instead of what's real.
Yeah.
If they believed they were doing harm, they wouldn't be doing it.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, then you are giving them more grace than I was going to say.
Yeah.
There's another book that I'm not recommending because it's not available in English, and it was written by a guy in the 40s or 50s in Norway.
Yeah.
Eden Lovis, and I read it in German. So in this book, he calls it the Power Man. Basically, that would be translated. And what he likens a power man to is a psychopath.
Yeah. And well, there are those too.
Yes.
The fact that I'm giving them grace doesn't excuse it.
Right.
What I just said explains it. It doesn't excuse it. Right. They're still accountable.
Yeah.
But, you know, otherwise, I get myself in the position, we struggle with this a lot, judging ourselves spiritually superior because we get grace better.
Yeah.
So it's Jesus plus how much you get grace.
Yeah.
That makes you better than the person that doesn't get grace as much as you. We struggle with that a lot.
Yeah. We used to talk about, I think we've gotten legalistic about grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you didn't say it a certain way, like they don't get it. No, they don't get it. Yeah. Because they didn't say it a certain way.
Yeah.
And it
how ironic.
Keeps going round and round.
It's so ironic.
Yeah. I do think, I really can feel your struggle with that, because the intent, I mean, the effect is so evil, and is their intent. And because I mean, I went through a thing about a year ago with someone that I felt did not know how much damage they were doing. Yeah. And it didn't stop because they didn't know. Yeah. And but I really struggled at times with, if this isn't, like what it was like when you said it didn't matter, that's what that hit. It was like, if it was intentional, it was, then it's worse. And I don't know if it's worse. It was still.
Well, if you're on the receiving end, it's exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'm standing on the other side of the door from you, and I know you're there, and I slam you with it, okay, or if I'm in a hurry to get out that door and I come and swing it open and I didn't know you were there, I'm going to apologize either way.
Right. There's just a little bit of a different sentiment, or I can't quite put my finger on it.
The focus needs to be on what are you going to do about it, not how did it happen.
Right.
You know, how did it happen is a good therapeutic question. Like the way I would say it to you is, what was going on in you that set you up for this to happen to you? But I wouldn't do that until you were untangling and all that, because that sounds like I'm blaming you for the abuse, and I'm not. Right. But that would be like, you know, we had little kids, we told them don't go around on the road. If they did anyway, I wouldn't go out there and go, how'd they get here? You know, they get run over. What if it was a Ford? You know, I'd say there are people that deal with this. Yeah. The question is, what are we going to do? Yeah. That's the big question. And sometimes people get caught up in that whole trying to figure out how we got to this place. And in the end, we're in this place.
Right.
So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
But I want to reiterate that I'm not, when I say they have good intentions, I'm not saying that justifies it.
Right.
They're still accountable for it.
Yeah.
They're responsible for their behavior, and they're responsible, if it's unhealthy, to learn healthy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
More responsible, as a matter of fact, as leaders. Because leaders are supposed to be further ahead than the people that are following them, you know. Remember when we went to that John Wimber thing, and he said, you know, if you want to know if you're a leader, just turn around. If there's nobody there, you aren't. If there's a bunch of people following you, you are.
You are a leader.
And see, But leaders are more accountable, and in a spiritually abusive place, they use Bible verses to tell you, don't you dare hold me accountable, I'm the leader.
Yes.
You don't get to confront me about this.
Right.
I remember when I was, an incident that happened with, when I was doing counseling at Open Door. Mm-hmm. I had spoken, and somebody got offended. I hurt their feelings, not intentionally. I didn't even know they were there, or and I didn't mention them for sure. Yeah. But I said something, and they got hurt feelings. So they came in, and my door said leader, whatever, counseling pastor, like that. Okay. See, if I say a hurtful thing to people, that's just a hurtful thing. Okay. So I would encourage you to come and hold me accountable for that. Yeah. If I don't know what you're talking about, I'd say, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah. If I knew what you were talking about, I'd say, I'm sorry. If I disagreed, I would say, I don't see it that way. Mm-hmm. But if I say, I'm the pastor, so you don't get to come in here, that's the spiritual abuse part, not the hurtful thing I did. That's just a hurtful thing in the course of human relations. Mm-hmm.
It happens.
Yeah. Right. And so if I use my authority to be less accountable and also to shame people for noticing where I'm at, because they don't get to, because I'm the leader, that's the abusive part.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's what happened to you. Mm-hmm. You described it a while ago when it's something as little as his taking the money from the and paying off parking tickets, or no, that he ate more bread.
Yeah, that too.
That he ate more bread from the thing.
Yeah, that was the first line. Then it was the parking ticket.
And then you said it out
loud.
Then
it was the trip to Jamaica or whatever.
And he could have done any of those things, like I'm sorry or whatever. But
you're right.
But he threw something at you that made you feel like you have no right to.
Less likely to confront next time.
Yes,
yes.
Right, for sure.
Yes, yeah.
And whether intent's in that, there is intent, like he does that on purpose. Yeah. What I would say is that when somebody's doing that, it is their way. Yeah. It is their way. Yeah. This is how I deal with people who notice me.
Yeah. Yes.
My way.
I see.
So if it's intentional, if it's not like he's not like going, I am going to really mess them up here, right? No, it's their way. It's how they've probably gotten their way
all their
for
lives.
Maybe all their life.
Yeah.
Or somebody did it to them. Who knows?
Yeah, or never got their way, but now they get to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that could be too.
This way, they figured out I can get my way this way.
Sure.
Yeah, and then especially if you put God behind it,
absolutely,
then anything goes.
Confronting me is confronting God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the more unconvinced people are of their own identity in God, the more they're going to be susceptible to that kind of voice.
Yes.
Because they want it so much.
Yeah. When I, a few years back, did an interview documentary with other people that were part of this group, but also were kicked out or left, I heard many stories that I didn't hear when I was in the group. The men, or they were younger men, they were drawn in much closer than I was. So their stories would be multiplied by what I would have to say.
Like worse.
Way worse. And in more intimate and just very, very destructive. And to think that mine is already very bad, but those poor fellows, And one of this is more a funny story, but it's also a giveaway. But they had to always go on these mission trips with him, and he had a family, so it's not that that kept him. And they were gone for a weekend. They just drove to another country, which from Germany's perspective is not that far, but it's a good drive, especially for people that work during the week and then on their weekends they're supposed to do this. And they just wanted to get home on the Sunday or whatever it was, and they made it so clear, we don't have time for this mission trip. We just want to get home. And then the leader said to them, just drop me off here for a second and wait, I'll be right back. He didn't come back, and so they started looking, and they found him in a hair salon. He got a haircut. And so, of course, they were like, man, what are you doing? We have no time, we need to get home. And he said, you guys, I knew that you were going to come in here and confront me, and that was a test from the Lord to show you how rebellious you yet are.
God, I wish I could get away with that stuff.
You can't get away with it from the inside.
No, and not in a million years.
Yeah,
it does accumulate until the people like me are just saying, okay, I'm feeling so out of sorts, and I've heard you talk about that in a different talk. I'm so out of sorts with myself. They've gotten me to distrust my own moral system.
So wait. So it was a test to see how unspiritual they were by noticing.
By not waiting patiently in the car.
Okay.
Well, you used the word rebellious.
Yeah.
See, I would have said it's a test to see how long it takes them to spot crap.
Yeah.
Oh, it took you that long to spot this crap?
You're an idiot. Well, that's abusive, though.
Right, that'd be kind of nasty, but we'll get the point across. Yeah.
And helping, incredible. I mean, this conversation, hearing these stories, it does remind me of some of the things that we learned and lived in. But to it's so much more fun, actually, to help people. The joke you made about it took you that long to spot the crap. Yeah. Like if people would to encourage people to go. You did good there. For you to say it out loud.
Yes.
And wow, good for you.
Yeah. But
good for you.
See, the problem wasn't the problem; they were the problem.
Yeah. Right in that situation.
So
yes.
When the problem was, he let them hang out to dry while he went and got a haircut on a mission trip.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes, exactly. And then to the extreme, that's probably the most extreme story that I am aware of. And my husband is a personal witness because he was living with a young fellow at the time. They had convinced one of he was early 20s, or maybe even under 20. I was early 20s, so under 20. That he had severe sin, basically the worst sin. I'm not going to say it because I want him to be able to watch this video too and not feel bad about it. So the worst kinds of sin, and they had convinced him that he's guilty of it. And he hadn't. There's no way of knowing.
Oh, okay.
He said no, but they were convinced.
But the guy with the word from the Lord knew.
Yes, yes, and there were dreams. People had dreams, and we'd all be like, That's when the members become part of the abuse, because when that happens for all of us, and then we're always like, hey, why are you turning on me? You're supposed to be my friend, but then it's like, well, the Lord, and then so when it happened, when
Can't
you
argue
get
with
to
that.
then you turn that around and you get to hurt the other person in the name of God, and so the remedy was focus on your sin. Pray about it all day long. You need to worship more. You need to read the Bible more. You need to do spiritual stuff more. That's how you get better. And James, like I said, lived with him and just heard his weeping through the door. And it went on, a long time. He actually checked himself into a mental ward, not to hurt himself.
So he wouldn't hurt himself, to protect for something he didn't have.
For something he didn't have.
We saw this happen with people who have an agenda that everything is demons.
Yeah.
So you go to them, and their agenda is everything is demons. So right away they start trying to cast out demons, except that there is no demon there. So now you have a demon that didn't get cast out. Right? So the joke was, which is not a joke, it's a tragedy, is if you didn't have demons when you got there, you had them when you left.
Yeah.
It is true. It is my group, or that group, was obsessed with demons and mysteries and mythical stuff. They went as deep as you can cast out a demon of the fleshly realm of a person, but it can be in their soul, in different layers of the soul, and then there's the spirit and the layers of the spirit, and you can cast
all biblical terms.
Right, very much.
I'm just going, run for your life.
Yeah, run away.
Yeah. Oh man.
So our focus is on leaders. Is there hope for someone that has found success, painful success, I suppose, to change for good, really change?
Well, the easiest way, the best way, is if they get swallowed by a whale.
Yeah?
Which is what happened in Chicago. The guy got swallowed by a whale. Now we'll see if he listens better now that he's been spit out on the beach. But You know, because people listen really well after they've been swallowed by whales.
Yeah.
So whatever that is, whatever that would be for the person, you know.
Yeah, something needs to fail.
Yeah.
It needs to be...
so that they can find out that they're okay because of Jesus. That's the big thing. You know, I had this gal come in one time, and she had perfect daily, everyday, daily devotions for years, okay? And then something happened, you know, someone died in her family or whatever, and she stopped, and she couldn't get them back, okay? So she came to me for counseling to help her get back her regular daily devotions. So you can imagine how that went. Yeah. So I said, okay, so here's your assignment. I want you to go home and don't do daily devotions on purpose.
Okay.
Okay. And then see if you can know that you're just okay because of Jesus. And it was so hard for her, but she got there. But because that, and it's not that don't do daily devotions.
Yeah.
Do you know, the irony of them saying read your Bible more is if you actually did, you'd spot them.
Yeah.
You understand? But they don't teach you how to read the Bible.
Right.
You know, when we really came on this grace thing full bore, the Bible read differently too.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I wanted to pull up this Colossians thing. I'll show you something.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so this is in Colossians 1. And verse 9 says, "For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will." See, in the old days, that would have been like, well, what's wrong with me? Because that's not happening. So it started piling weights on me. Fill you with the knowledge of His will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives. Well, I'm being left out here. I mean, you know, like that. Okay. So that you may live a life worthy of the Lord. Yeah, that would have been a big term for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Worthy of the Lord. Please Him in every way. So now I got a checklist going, and I don't get to check anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Please Him in every way. Even if I felt like I was doing really well,
Yeah.
I couldn't check that. Please Him in every way.
Yeah.
Okay. Please Him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work. Oh man, not doing that. Growing in the knowledge of God. There, got to read your Bible more. Okay. Being strengthened with all power according to His glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience. See, by then, I'm all beat up. You know, I'm into what I would call scrupulous self-examination.
Yeah.
Okay. Next verse. Never got to the next verse.
Yeah.
Here's the next verse. Joyfully giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you. What? No, see, He qualified you. So all those things that I would have thought I had to do to qualify, there must be a different reason for those because He already qualified you. Like maybe read the Bible so you can learn stuff, not to qualify, because He qualified you, you know, like that. And when you start reading it that way, it comes out differently. You know, it's different because it's just full of good news. But when you have a legalistic grid, it's really full of bad news.
But to add to that, I mean, because Paul wrote that, and what he wrote in Philippians was his own testimony. I think it's Philippians 2 or 3 where he says, where he reads these things that were part of his false self. I was circumcised the 8th day, Hebrew of Hebrews. Remember that?
Yeah. Of the nation of Israel.
Of the nation of Israel, tribe of Benjamin. What I love about his list, it looks as stupid as our list is, because his list, it means nothing to us.
Right.
I mean, I don't get any points for having been, circumcised the 8th day. Nobody cares. Pharisee of Pharisees, of the tribe of Benjamin, nobody cares. So what's my list? But the point is that was what qualified him. That was what made him feel good. If anyone had a mind to put confidence in their ability to do the list, I did, says Paul.
Yeah.
So his whole conversion was around going, I see that stuff as rubbish. These things that I was doing, not going to movies, whatever they were, there wasn't anything wrong with being a Pharisee, of Pharisees. I mean, to know the Bible, that's what that would have meant.
Yeah.
But his massive exchange was, now that I be found in Him, and a righteousness that comes not by my keeping the law, but that comes through Christ, and that have been qualified by Him, and radically different way of life.
Yeah.
We hear those Hebrew things that he wore as his
were the biggest
identity.
things to him, though.
They were the biggest things to him, but we can look at that and go, well, I don't do that. Yeah, we do. Right. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yes. So the work would be to go, okay, what is our version
We give
of
money,
that?
We get tongues, where we don't get tongues.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus plus something.
He was in a religious system, just like we are, and that put this stuff on him. Yeah. He bought into it, hook, line, and sinker.
Better than anybody.
He was converted. Right.
Better than anybody
else. If anybody had in mind to do the Baptist stuff, I far more. I did. I out-Baptist them. I out-Baptisted them all. Anyway.
And yet you realize it's all rubbish.
Yeah, total rubbish.
Well, and the other thing is, like in Timothy, Paul says to beware of the Judaizers, beware of them, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. So in other words, what he's saying is, they think that being godly pays off.
Yes.
But then he says, but actually, godliness is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. Find a contented legalist.
Well, even that would be your story.
Yeah, find a contented person in leadership in your situation.
Yeah.
Never content. Never enough. Never.
Right.
Well, when you had to repent of 72 things, when would contentment come out of that? I mean, there's always got to be another one. If you did,
I'd have fallen asleep and not got through the list.
And then you wouldn't have go, yeah, you're right.
I'd have canceled out the ones I didn't.
I know.
My leader and I, we had an interesting relationship, and I think it started out very fatherly, but he was only 6 years older than me or so, and incredibly audacious for his age. He would just turn 30. So I was just the dumb, naive college student who was looking for direction. Well, there was this one day where a few of us met him at a stable, and he was showing off. You know, he could jump on the wooden horse and whatnot. He was very athletic.
Urban cowboy.
Yeah, something like that. And he, at one point, I think I must have told, because I wanted him to think that I was cool, that I had done martial arts in my life. So at one point, he came to me from the back and put me in a chokehold, and that's kind of the position I found myself in. And out of default, I rolled him over my shoulder. That's what I learned. You know, that's what you do. Someone comes, you roll him over your shoulder. And he was on the ground rolling in the
manure.
Straw. Yeah, there was horses. So he was rolling in the straw and the stuff on the ground, And I remember this flabbergasted look on his face. And he was just saying, how could this happen? How could this happen? And
good for you.
Wow.
I feel like there was something I had in the beginning, and my own audacity, my default, my gut sense.
Sure.
And I think to him, he learned that he had to break me in order to have any control over me.
Wow.
Because if like in the story of the Wizard of Oz, I already had what it took. What I needed to learn is to I don't want to say die to myself, because that is so misused, but what I needed to learn is kind of just really submit and say not my way, but Jesus' way.
Yeah.
And that's what made me vulnerable, that I was still looking for the fulfillment of my ideas for the future. And and that was the trap that he realized he could create with me, because I had such high ambition.
Was death to self a big teaching?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody, right. And you
so
can always
think
hold
about
that over
this.
Someone. Yeah.
People who are into that are totally preoccupied with themselves.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's exactly opposite.
Yeah. To worshiping God, you are actually beholding your own lack of weakness.
Yeah, scrupulous self-examination.
Yes, there it is again. Yeah.
Psychologically, in fact, we talk with our kids ministers and stuff like that, dealing with little kids, that that whole thing of dying to self, you need to be really careful with it. Psychologically, you can't die to yourself until you have a self. You have some sense of identity of yourself, that this is actually mine. Going back to the text you alluded to, when Jesus washed their feet, that came from a place of fullness. He, knowing that he was from the Father, was going back to the Father, everything had been given into his hands. He was able, from that place of knowing who he was, give it all, die to self, as it were, give it all away, because he knew who he was. I remember when I was a little kid, I loved cars. I still love cars, but they were little model cars and play cars. And I remember my parents had some missionary had come into town, and wouldn't it be a great idea for you to give this car to the missionary's kid?
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was a great idea, but I did it.
Yeah.
It didn't do what they wanted it to do. I didn't learn how to be more generous.
Yeah.
I didn't learn how to be more generous.
Yes.
What I felt like was nothing is actually mine.
Resentful.
There's nothing that's mine.
Yeah.
And I think so developmentally even there's some language we use that can be really damaging if people don't understand some of these things. With a kid, you don't tell them to die. You don't have a self to give away yet. So and that's why I think the gospel and identity, these issues of identity, who am I, for free because God qualified us,
did it?
It's huge. It's a huge, fundamental, basic thing. And if you don't have that, you don't have a self to give away. And you are then, because you're always trying to get the self,
well, you know,
and earn it, then you are totally susceptible to those kinds of abusive tactics.
When I was a kid, if I got in a fight with some kid for, I don't know, hurt my feeling, whatever like that, the help I got from my parents was good Christian little boys don't get in fights. Okay. If my daughter got in a fight and told me about it in school, I would say, so what were you getting special from right then?
Yeah.
Besides Jesus? And then they could tell you.
Totally different question.
Yeah. Because you gave them power to make you okay, and you're already okay, so what? You don't have to do that.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
One of the things is the fallacy. I want to say it's damaging theology of death to self, and what's even trickier about it is Paul actually uses those words. You know, dying. Okay, but death to self is. This is when a light went on for me. Not totally, but like, wait a minute. You know, like that was this. I heard this guy confronting that concept. He was confronting it. And, you know, we were supposed to be like Christ, and, you know, we're supposed to hang on the cross like he did, but you have to do it yourself. So he went through this thing about pounding his feet and then pounding his hand, but he doesn't have any, it's impossible, he can't have anything to pound the other hand with, so you can't crucify yourself. You can't. It can't be done. You're just like this, you know. But he said that's like the fruitlessness of it. That's the ridiculousness of it.
Well, I remember turning that to deny yourself and coming out of the Beatitudes, blessed are those who recognize they can't save themselves, they come upon you for grace. Deny yourself. One spin on that is you need to deny that you yourself can
do anything.
Do what you think you're supposed to do.
We've heard a lot of good news again in this segment, talking about the abusive leaders and why they are trapped. Now we have a much better idea. Thank you so much. And if you will, stay tuned for the third part.